Hi there. Our topic today is within the managerial accounting and specifically within the cost accounting. Now, the main purpose of the cost accounting is to calculate the unit cost of the cost object. And by the cost object, here we mean either it is a product or services or a project or even a customer and also other things. Now, the cost usually divided or classified into two types: the fixed cost and the variable cost. And the fixed costs are those costs which do not vary or change with the cost object. The more you produce, the less you produce, the more service you give, the more customer you serve, the more project you have. The cost of these type of costs remain constant, remain the same, did not change or do not change. For example, let's say the salary of the supervisor in our manufacturing organization. We produce every day more and more, and our production is increasing, inventory increase, etc., etc. But the salary of the supervisor does not change. Even the salary of the accountant does not change. So we call this type of cost as fixed cost. Whereas other costs, they are vary with the cost object. They vary with the product, with the service, with the project, and with the customer, and this is why we call them the variable cost. The variable cost. Like, for example, when we want to produce, we need more material, we need more laborers, for example. All these are costs, need to be added, but they are not the same. It's according to the project, it's according to the product, okay? And according to your, let's say, activities. Now, going back to our unit cost. Unit costs usually include two important costs. The first one, we call it the direct cost, and the second one, we call it the indirect cost. The direct costs are those costs which in fact directly related to the cost object. For example, it's directly related to the product, and they are easily traceable. We can trace it easily, we can calculate it easily. The most famous example are the direct material cost, the direct labor cost. They are related to the product. We can easily calculate them and we can easily trace them. Okay? Whereas the other type of the cost, which is included in the unit cost, we call them the indirect cost. Usually these are the overheads. Why we call them indirect? Because they are not easily traceable, and therefore they need an allocation and recalculation before we assign them to the unit cost. Usually they are, as I say, the overhead, right? For example, the rent, the rates, the electricities. Okay, even we have also indirect material costs and indirect labor costs, etc. So therefore, and here we will now reaching to our topic today, which is called the ABC, or the activity-based costing. Now, costing accounting or cost accounting is usually introduced in the United States, not in the United States, I'm sorry for that, in the United Kingdom, in the UK, during the time of industrial revolutions. Now, till the time which in fact it is it's become clear and until it's reached the United States. The United States people or the United States accountant, they like it, they use it, and they say it, and the idea of that. But the American people did not develop it and use it as it is. Maybe, well, they use some, let's say, for example, sophisticated tools to calculate the cost per unit, but they follow exactly the British method, which say that the overhead, which cannot be calculated easily or cannot be traced easily, can be divided by, usually they use one activity, like for example divided by the number of laborers, or they divided by the total amount of raw materials, for example. And if they use only one activity, that will not give accurate calculation of the overheads. Besides, it will not give them a good decision making. Besides, it will allow them to do variance analysis from time to time, which is in fact, I say, it's time consuming and costly in some organization. So until the idea reached to Japan, and you know, Japanese people are a little bit sharper than the well, sorry to say that, especially in accounting and managerial accounting, more sharper than the British people and more sharper than the American people or accountant. So they create a system, they call it the ABC system, or the activity-based costing. They said, why use only material or the number of labor for allocating the overhead in order to assign it to the unit cost? They said that activity should be related to the cost itself, which means that each cost has a causes. Why you pay this? Or you paid it for what? So use that activity for that cost, and then you would divide it by that number of units, number of let's say number of labor, square meters, even the number of employees, even for example, let's say the cost of the project, whatever is that. So therefore we have different overheads or indirect costs with different activities. And from this idea it came the idea of ABC, and that of course it gives first of all accurate, or at least more accurate, calculation of the overheads or indirect costs, a better allocation for the assignment of these indirect costs to the cost object, and it reduced the time for the variance analysis. And then sometimes there is no need even to make the variance analysis. And more important, that is give us more planning, more control, and more and better decision making. And thank you very much.